find your own unique fingerprint of charisma to bring to your podcast. You've got all these voices in the world.
I'm Becky Fountain, a professional voiceover artist who shares how podcasters can use their voice to connect more deeply with listeners. Having worked with brands like TUI, Network Rail and Sharp Technologies, today I'm sharing how tone, pacing, presence and personality can help your podcast become more impactful.
Becky, why does authenticity matter in podcasts?
I think authenticity matters in podcasts because you've got to be transparent these days. AI's sort of bulldozed onto the scene, and I think there's like a real sort of concern that people aren't sure at the moment if what they're looking at, seeing and hearing is even real. You can still be super curious as interviewing somebody, being genuinely interested in what someone's talking about and genuinely wanting to learn more. Some people, the way they sort of rhythmically put their sentences together, I think a big thing is leave pauses. Not so many, but if like you're getting to a point and you can see there's a little bit of anticipation build there. I was watching like a bit of Joe Rogan, and he's not necessarily an academic, but he's curious and he's a truth seeker and he's always learning. He's happy to admit when he didn't know something. He's not particularly pushing an agenda.
When you really go above and beyond when you make a mistake, this is where you actually create the ambassadors from your brand. Because people will be like, okay, this went wrong. And then those guys went all the way to like satisfy me and make sure they had a good experience.
If you're being filmed, the worst advice ever is when someone says,
Becky, why does authenticity matter in podcasts, but in branding after all?
okay. I think authenticity matters in podcasts because you've got to be transparent these days. You've got to show that you have a certain level of experience that's not been, don't sort of try and put something into too much of like a perfect, end piece. People like a bit of rusticness. They want to see the real person. They want to see the real you. Otherwise, it's a bit like mis-selling. I don't really know much about branding, to be fair. I'll be honest.
You're good at it.
But I think just being authentic, people like that nowadays because, AI's sort of bulldozed onto the scene. And I think there's like a real sort of concern that people aren't sure at the moment if what they're looking at, seeing and hearing is even real.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some of the sort of images and some of the deep fakes and everything that you see, in AI at the moment, you might not even know you're seeing it. And all the sort of the bots that you might be communicating with on like social media that you think are real people. And, there's this sort of swirling sort of growing feeling of like just mistrust in general. And I think if you can bring a bit of authenticity to the table, then you've automatically put yourself like ahead of all the sort of the polished AI, falseness already. And people are really craving that at the moment.
So they're craving authenticity or they're craving AI content?
They're craving authenticity, I think. Yeah. I mean, I think there's obviously a lot of interest in AI. But I think as long as you kind of like, oh, by the way, this is AI and this isn't, that's fine. So don't sort of lie to people.
So do you think people do that at all? I mean, I don't see. So to put back a bit of context, we kind of started interacting on LinkedIn, right? Mm-hmm. And the thing that I'm seeing on LinkedIn is, first of all, anybody can claim anything nowadays. Like literally, you go on social media and you're like, you can claim anything.
Yeah.
Now, is that true? Is that not? That's up for the public to decide, let's say. But there are those posts that are AI. There are those comments that are AI. If you're a bit in the weeds of it, maybe some people are fooled. I don't think so, but maybe some. But it's only going to get better. I mean, we're only going to get in a world where, closer to a world where AI content is going to be as good as human content.
I think that what you just said there about how the comments and the stuff that we can detect is AI, I think that's just the bits we can detect. I think there's like all levels of highly sophisticated that we are just assuming is real that isn't. I mean, I was like listening to a podcast just this morning about it, and I was like, I kind of suspected it was maybe that bad, but having it confirmed by people that know about it was just like, oh my God, yeah, okay. I mean, even like, okay, do you remember a time when you would look at Amazon reviews and you'd be like, oh, this is like, yeah, it's got like 5,000 5-star reviews, and but then you look through the reviews, read them, and you'd be like, oh, well, these are all fake, and it was obvious. Well, they've got a lot better, but if you're
interesting,
yeah, as well, I think, well, there's like you say, it's only going to get with all like the sort of language learning models and ChatGPT and technology learning how we talk, how we use slang, how we, different people use like slightly different spacing in like, their messages and all this sort of thing. It wouldn't be difficult to like replicate that. So, I saw a video on YouTube like last week and I purposely didn't listen to it because either it was like a snippet from a podcast, and either the guy it was genuinely him, but he'd polished himself up to look better on this clip, or the whole thing was BS. And because I wasn't sure, I was like, well, I'm not going to listen to it then. So I think...
Interesting.
So yeah, like first impressions like matter. Like, so no one wants to feel like they've been kind of hoodwinked and fooled and like, do you know what I mean?
Hoodwinked. I don't know. So I'm learning a lot of words together with Becky, guys. Just so you know.
I did this last week.
Next one is drivel, but we're gonna get back to this in a few minutes. But hoodwink. What? How do you say this? Hoodwinked.
Hoodwinked. It's basically like somebody's tricked you. They've pulled the wool over your eyes. It's like I'm not sure where the expression comes from. I'd be interested to know actually. But it's sort of like I don't know, like hood, like it's sort of like you've been fooled by something, and nobody likes to feel like, oh, damn, like you feel foolish, don't you, when you've been sort of hoodwinked.
How do you make sure to stay authentic on a podcast? What is it? Because at the end of the day, again, AI is only going to get better. We can fake a whole bunch of stuff. So how do you stay authentic?
Well, first of all, like I said, transparency and staying curious as well. Like you don't like the best podcast interviewers, I think. So I was watching like a bit of Joe Rogan, and he's not necessarily an academic, but he's curious and he's a truth seeker, and he's always learning, and he wants to. He sort of cross-references things he's from guests he's previously had and the current ones. He's happy to admit when he didn't know something. He's not particularly pushing an agenda. His opinion on something can be influenced if you raise a piece of information that he didn't know about. So I think it's like being flexible in your sort of approach to, what you're talking about. Because if you go on a podcast and you've clearly got an agenda, a motive, and you just think you know everything, and regardless of what anybody else, whatever information you get, you're still just like, no, well, I think this. Yeah, you're probably still being authentic, but you're being authentic in like the wrong kind of way because you're not being flexible. So I think authenticity is, and again, I know we talked about this last week, like owning up to like when things went wrong, or if you haven't got a story of when something went wrong for you, or like you can't think of one, kind of like relay someone else's like, I've read about the time this guy did. As long as like they've told the world first.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, just and not being like robotic. I mean, it's really, I know as soon as somebody says to you, like if you're being filmed, then like the worst advice ever is when someone says act natural. I mean, that's like a conflicting like statement in itself, isn't it?
Don't think about a pink elephant.
It's like saying dry yourself wet. It's like act natural. It's like, well, do you want me to act or do you want me to be natural? But it makes people sort of, ugh. But I think, just kind of relaxing, not kind of being afraid to say the wrong thing, which is really difficult in this day and age because once you've said something, it's recorded, it's out there forever. And I think there's this horrible thing we have where if you thought something then you're not allowed to say, oh, I don't actually think that anymore. Do you know what I mean? It's like people make everything so concrete these days. It's like, well, you said that then. So it's like, yeah, I know, but I've learned things since then, so I don't think it now.
Right. Which is tricky because everything is recorded. But that's the mark of, I think, true intelligence, being able to admit your own mistakes or things where you were wrong and just evolve from this and grow from it.
Definitely.
So I guess the next point is, how do you keep that authenticity whilst delivering value, whilst not being boring? Joe Rogan does that perfectly well. This is exactly what you mentioned. It's like, well, delivering value. He has access to the biggest brains in their own industry in the world, in the English-speaking world, let's say. So there is this on how not to be boring and delivering value, but how does a more common podcaster, B2B podcaster, do to achieve that?
Okay, so Joe Rogan has got access to like the biggest brains and, interesting guests, but you can still be super curious as interviewing somebody, and that doesn't cost anything. Doing like a bit of research, like being genuinely interested in what someone's talking about and genuinely wanting to learn more. Like, when I used to read my kids like the same story over and over again, they knew that when I was getting bored, and then they'd start to like not listen and start to say, "Oh, can we read a different one?" And I'd be like, "That's my fault because I've read this. I'm not interested in it."
Yeah.
And that really does come across. Like, people underestimate it. Like, when I'm doing my voice acting, if I listen to something back and I'm like, my mind wandered there, I can hear the point when my mind wandered and I wasn't thinking about what I was supposed to be thinking about anymore. And if I can hear that, everyone can hear that, like, especially if it, whatever. So I think bring something interesting to it, be curious. I think, of course it helps being, having access to people that are very interesting. But it's like this morning, like the podcast I listened to this morning, the Joe Rogan one, there was two guys talking about quantum AI.
Nice.
I don't know. Yeah, I know, right? I don't know anything about quantum AI. Well, I know a little bit now, but probably not. It raised more questions than it did answers, I tell you. But it was
Classic.
it's like I know nothing about that. I would probably never speak to these two guys in a real life situation because they're just too bloody intelligent. We wouldn't mix in the same circles. But I was like interested because Joe Rogan brought it down to kind of like of my point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Bring it back to your listener's point of view, like, that level of understanding. Assume that people like, I'm not saying assume everyone's like, stupid but just like always look at it from the point of view of like, get to get the most people to understand, to get the most people to engage, rather than just like, oh, I'm going to show how clever I am here by using all these like complicated words and blah, blah, blah. He's very good at sort of including different layers of understanding of like an audience, I think. And like I say, still he's very, very good at asking questions and like little things, like someone's doing like several long sentences of talking about whatever, and he'll come back to like the interesting bit in there that every listener was thinking, oh, I wanted to hear more about that bit. Do you know what I mean? He so demonstrates he's really listening.
100%. I think he's able to, so back to the advice on how to do good podcasts, being authentic, driving value, not being boring. What he does perfectly is he's able to ask the questions in a way that will make the guest speak to the topic in a simple way enough so that everybody can at least grasp what's talked about.
Yeah.
So as you said, the very long sentence, maybe they will not like seize and grasp everything, but like Joe will come back to like, okay, but what about this? Oh, but you mentioned that. I'm curious because I didn't know about it. And since he didn't know about it, he's asking the person to break it down plainly and simply.
Exactly.
And I like that. There is something that I would like to pick your brain on, Becky, which is tonality, vocal tone. So you're a voice actor. How can we use our voice in a way that helps authenticity, not being boring, delivering value? Any advice on that?
It's a tricky one because when I get given like a script, I've got directions with it, like if they want a certain type of read, and it's usually like much shorter, like if it's a commercial or whatever. But I'd say for something like interviewing and podcasting, I think each person's got to find their own style.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's some people like, I'll probably like show my age here, but I don't know if you remember like Nigel Mansell, like that racing driver, and he was like renowned for being the most boring sounding, like monotone person to interview ever. Like, and he was pretty dull.
Okay.
Like,
only compliments for this good old Nigel.
Yeah, I mean, he was a great racing driver, but it was kind of like, he's like, people used to take the mick out of him because he was just like, it was like, oh my God, is he talking again? Like, no, but I think something that I would do if I was hosting a podcast, I would notice in social situations when people were the most engaged in what I was talking about. And I would ask myself, right, are they engaged because of how I'm talking about this, or is it the topic?
Mm-hmm.
Some people, the way they sort of rhythmically put their sentences together, and I wish I could think of an example, but I can't, but they're just really attractive to listen to. And then other people could be saying the most interesting thing in the world, and you've lost everyone in the room because there's no pause. I think a big thing is leave pauses. Like not so many, but if like you're getting to a point and you can see there's a little bit of anticipation build there.
Yeah.
Like, I'm saying be authentic. Don't sort of pretend to forget what you're going to say. But I mean, just be sort of like, it's like having a little bit of presence about sort of like, as in, and wait for this, what I'm going to say now. Boredom. Do you know what I mean? Like have a look at it as kind of like know when there's parts of podcast to be sort of telling a story, and then know when there's parts of the podcast where you're asking enough questions and being curious enough that you're putting the emphasis on them. And like I would be watching out for when people were paying attention to what I was saying, and then thinking, oh well, how did I do that? And just try not be Nigel.
So what's the name of this poor Nigel guy? Because now I want to check him out.
Nigel Mansell. Have you never heard of him? The racing driver.
Mansell, British former motorsport racing driver. Got him.
Sorry, Nigel.
Yeah. Sorry, Nigel Mansell. You're awesome guy. So, okay, I see him now. Never heard of him, never seen him. So, two things I want to follow up on here, Becky. I think, so I don't know how it is in the UK, but I suspect it will be pretty similar. Politicians are very good at this. Politicians are very good because they learn how to be eloquent. Is that the proper English word? I'm not sure here.
I guess so, yeah. Eloquent.
And I think I just lost the second point I wanted to make because I wanted to focus on Nigel. So here we go, a perfect representation of this. But yeah, I get you. So you make sure to master pauses. That's how you can properly deliver value. Did I do it right here?
Master pauses and I don't know, don't be afraid to be a bit cheeky as well. Like, if in a good humoured sense, if you're sort of quoting someone, there's nothing wrong with doing a little impression of them. Like, well, like you don't have to just say, oh, and they said this. Like, do their voice, do their accent, do a little, just like try and inject a little bit of life into like what you do and like what you say, because it can go a long way. And I think the great thing with the podcast is, especially as the host, like, unless you're terrible, you're not going to be talking for long enough for people to be like, oh, God, are they still droning on? Like, so the bits you do say, like, you've got to season it, add a little bit of spice and kind of like get your guest excited. Yeah. Make them sort of like wind them up and watch them go.
Couldn't agree more. And that's actually the point I wanted to make. So thanks a lot, Becky, for reminding me of this. I think when someone is truly passionate about their topic, about what they are talking about, you feel it as well. Back Definitely. To the authenticity piece of it and potentially getting value out of it as well. And it not being boring. Like, you ask the wrong person about a specific topic and it will be boring as hell, although the topic is super interesting. But you ask the exact same questions to somebody who's passionate about it. And even if they are the worst speaker ever, you will see that they're like, their eyes is shining. I don't know if I can say this in English. And like in their voice, you can feel like, yeah, this is what I live for. Now, sometimes you need to like control them a bit and make them, recenter them on a specific topic that you want to explore. But I guess that helps as well. So back to the being a good interviewer and asking the right questions to the person in a way that will make them shine, basically.
Yeah, like light them up, like ignite that spark. And yeah.
That's the word. Love this. So you mentioned it a bit earlier, and I want to dig a little bit into that. And talking about things that went wrong. Why is that important, in your opinion?
Because you've walked the walk, you've talked the talk. Nobody ever gets anywhere if they don't fail. If you've not failed at something, then you've not done enough. Like, you don't know, you can't possibly know enough about your field if you haven't had some sort of failures. And they don't have to be massive. I mean, some people's might be catastrophic, but it's important to describe, little things that you've run into and how you overcame them, and kind of, and also it makes people, it's relatable because it makes people feel more sort of like, oh, right, well, they're not this sort of like perfect, holy being who never got anything wrong. Like people used to be so scared to talk about their mistakes. And now, like, I'm liking the sort of trend where it's becoming more sort of celebrated, that people are like talking about their sort of, like other people are being a bit more vulnerable. And it's a thing that I'm pleased to see. I'd like to see more of, because it just makes people seem more human. It doesn't take anything away from you to say like, oh, I did this once and I really cocked it up. No one's going to sort of think like, oh, well, you don't know what you're doing. They're going to think like, you clearly in an all right enough place to admit that you made a mistake. And I don't know, I just think it's important, like getting back to the authenticity thing. And as well, owning your mistakes, it kind of makes you look accountable to other people as well. Like, rather than like, no, nothing ever goes wrong, nothing's my fault. It's kind of like it's your way of saying like, I ballsed this up and I'll make sure that doesn't happen again. And people are like, I like that.
So I love this. There's so much to to follow up on. So my favorite podcaster, actually, Chris Williamson, if you listen, man, very
Oh
little
yeah,
chances,
I didn't listen to him, but you did recommend him.
Modern Wisdom, absolutely fantastic. I recommend it. He talks about this about one of his recent things. So he's struggling with a health problem right now. And his audience is kind of blaming him for not talking about it enough. Like, hey, share your struggles as well. Like, share where you're at right now. And, we want to be supportive. You opened up about it a few times and like you had huge support. Like, talk more about it. And he's like, I get that, and I understand, like, for anybody going through this as well, it's something that, it's comforting to know that somebody that you potentially admire, follow, listen to, and so on is going through the same thing. But he's like, as long as I haven't closed the loop, meaning as long as I haven't gotten out of it, like if I'm still struggling with it and there is no happy ending and lesson, I don't feel legit talking about it because it's just me struggling. And at worst, you will get, like, people stop listening to you or thinking you're credible. And at best, you will have pity. And this is not a feeling that people want to have necessarily towards themselves, like pity.
You really can't win. I often wonder about this myself because I think if you go like, woo, look at my life, it's great, then you get accused of sort of bragging and showing a false sort of, just showing the highlights. And then if you talk about, your vulnerabilities or things that you might be struggling with, then you're accused of like wanting pity. It's sort of like you can't really win with people. But I think like getting back to what you were saying about, he feels like he can't. Are you saying that he feels like he can't say any more about it because there is no solution?
No, so he hasn't found the solution yet. Or he knows the solution. It's just a long process and he hasn't gotten out of the health problem yet. So that's why he's like, I don't want to talk about it too much because best thing it will do is get me pity, and there is no happy ending. It's like the famous hero's journey that I'm sure you know, Becky. It's like you want a resolution, you want something happening at the end, be like, this was all for this, and this is what happens now. This is the teaching. And if you share your struggle, and that back to the topic of like admitting when something went wrong, I wanted to pick your brain on, is that good to do at any point in time, or should you only do it when you have found a solution to a problem? And there is a twist. It's like, hey, I struggle because, we made a mistake with a client, but then we turned this into a huge success for them, versus, hey, we made a mistake for our clients, end of the story. And it's like, yeah, okay, so you're just not credible. You're not doing your job right.
I think, I hate to say, but I think in situations like that, I think it's probably better to have the solution that you provided, because, I mean, I think it's okay to say like, oh, I often wonder what I'd do if X, Y, Z went wrong, like as if you're having like a hypothetical conversation. But to just sort of say like me saying like, oh, I've delivered these sound files and the person couldn't use them because they're all over processed. And I just thought, oh, well, it's better to have, like you say, it's better to have a solution. But again, it's different because you've just said about the guy with like the health problem thing that you listen to. That's different again, because that's a person and that's like someone's health as well. And I think, and you just said like people are sort of saying to him they want to hear more.
Yeah.
So it's like if your audience is saying we want to hear more about this, then they're you kind of give the people what they want. Like if like you don't have to sort of go on and on and on. You could just sort of say like, oh, like the latest update is there is no latest update, but I appreciate people. That people care and and it's making me feel a bit like this, and like that's I'm not going to go on about it too much, but I'll mention it every now and again. Again, just being like people. It would be nice if people could just be like a lot more open about like even saying like I don't actually know if there's any point in me saying this, or I don't know if people are fed up of me talking about this, or just kind of like the things that go on in here.
Mm-hmm.
It would be so much easier if people just like said them and just sort of said, oh, I worry about this, but I'll do it anyway, or so I'm not going to do it. Like it would be just, rather than everyone playing this sort of mind ready game, I think just say it. Just say us what we've got a tongue in our head. Say it.
That's an interesting one. So obviously that's a specific case. I agree. It's personal, it's health problem and so on.
Yeah,
there was a post from somebody I interact with on LinkedIn who talked about this as well, and who was about wins and losses in your business, right? And he mentioned the same thing. He's like, yeah, we all make mistakes. I'll share about it, the losses, of course, but there needs to be a fix to that. I don't know if it's about credibility. you want people to be able to relate to you, right? Being like, okay, he's human after all as well. And this increases trust, right? If you only share the wins, and nobody is only winning. There is nobody only winning.
Exactly.
Here we go. I had some potential clients, prospect, ask me, with who did it go wrong? With who did the program go wrong? It wasn't like, did the program ever go wrong? And it's like, people know that it's not always 100% successful. And sharing those failures, especially publicly on a podcast or on a LinkedIn post, is good because it will allow people to, see the truth behind it and like build better trust and authority. But there needs to be a happy ending, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think, it's definitely with, like you say, with anything sort of like service related, particularly, you can't just sort of say like this went wrong and then like that was the end of it. It's sort of like, no, this went wrong. And even though we couldn't rectify that point of it, we did everything else around it input. Because some things, well, I'll give you a quick example of something that happened to me ages ago. It was like, this was years ago. This was my very first ever live directed session. And it was for this job that was a lot of money. And the live directed session was with 5 people in New York that had all dialed in. So they were all watching me do this. And I was so nervous. And I was so pleased that it had gone okay after this. Like, it was like an hour session and everything had gone fine. And then I sort of mentally dropped the ball. And then I did this thing to the file that he just wanted me to send the file straight over. And I saved it in this incorrect way. Well, you've just seen my tech abilities just at the start of this interview. And for some reason,
I wish we had recorded the whole thing.
You'd have to bleep out a lot of the words. No, but and for some reason, this session that I'd saved was like lots and lots of me talking on top of myself. If you imagine like sound files like laid on top of each other like pancakes, like I'd mixed and rendered it somehow, all these different files. And it was like, it's called like destructive sort of software. So that had saved it like that. There was nothing I could do to undo it. And then I was just like, oh my God. And I had, and worse, I didn't even check it before sending it. I was like, oh, there you go. And he was like, this sounds a bit like there's 25 of you. And I was just like, oh, let me just fix that for you. Couldn't fix it. I was like, and then he was saying to me, oh, you must be able to do it somehow. Just you like clear the cache and do this, do that. And I was like, okay, I'll try that. I knew this wasn't going to happen. I went straight back into my studio. I recorded everything because it was still fresh in my mind.
Right.
I recorded everything to the best of my ability, exactly the way we did it. I tried to remember as much as possible, like just how we did everything, and sent that over. Told him, look, this isn't the session, but I've tried to do it. This is in case I can't like save the thing that I knew I couldn't save. And he was like, okay. And he was really grateful that I'd done everything I could. I said to him, like, he said, oh, well, try and do it by, in the next 24 hours. But if you can't do it. And the next morning I said, look, I know that I've saved it that way and I can't give you the original file, but I've done this, and I hope that's okay. And if not, I'll do pretty much anything to try and like rectify the situation, because they'd all struggled to like even make that call all together at the same time for this session. Right. But he was like, everything went fine. He was really pleased. He was grateful that I'd like gone into, just done everything I could to try and put it right. So it still wasn't like the best outcome, because they wanted the session where they directed me. But he could see that I'd done everything I could in my power to try and put it right. And he still gave me like a 5-star review, which was like more than I deserved. So even if when you're telling the story about when something went wrong, your solution wasn't the perfect solution, but it was the best you could do to kind of like navigate your mess up, then you're still showing that you care.
Oh, I love this. So I want to double down on this, Becky. There is this thing from my mentor who's like, when you do something wrong with a client, a refund is not enough. A refund is the base. Say, take the example of a restaurant, right? Or the steak was raw instead of well done, and I don't know, the drinks took 45 minutes to arrive and so on. A refund is not enough, because people spend their money, they also spend their time. They prepare for that party, that evening, that restaurant, diner, date, whatever. They moved out of their house and so on. So you need to go above and beyond. So you give them a refund, and they're like, okay, what is it going to take to make it right? And you give them a voucher for the next time, or you offer them the full-fledged dessert, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's like, when you really go above and beyond when you make a mistake, this is where you actually create the ambassadors from your brand. Because people will be like, okay, this went wrong. And then those guys went all the way to like satisfy me and make sure that I had a good experience. And this is costing the company money. Like this is costing a lot of money, which pushes you to make as little mistakes as possible. So to make every piece perfect so that you have less of those bad experiences. But when something like this happens, you don't only want the refund and the happy story. You want to go all the way, full blast on making it right to the person to create an ambassador for your brand. That's what you need to do.
That's interesting you say that, because sometimes the company deals with their mistakes so well that it almost 100% worth that mistake being made, rather than no, do you know what I mean? Because
100%.
This has happened to me. Like, you know, ordered something and like so it's turned up like battered, the packaging's like knackered, and they've been so good that I'm like, oh right, well, not only am I going to like recommend you to everyone, I'm going to buy it. Like I'm setting up a subscription now to order this thing from you all the time. And it was like, had that mistake not happened, I may not have even signed up for it because they were so good.
Ambassador.
So it's like, should we all be making a few little mistakes? But as long as you deal with it, like, you know, you treat, it's like, I love what you said. The refund is like the
baseline.
That's like, that's like the minimum.
Yeah.
That's not like the kind of like, you know, oh, there you go, done. Yeah, no, that's a good thing to remember. The refund is like the minimum.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, there is one last thing that I want to pick your brain on. Especially, so when it comes to podcasts, how do you make sure that when people listen to you, you make them feel like they can achieve the thing, and you don't, back to our point around overcomplicating it and making sure that, you know, the host is picking the brain of the guest properly. How do you make sure when you come up with podcast content, and any content really, that people feel they can actually achieve the thing, so you inspire them, not just educate them, for instance?
Well, there's obviously being relatable, but give someone like a kind of bite-sized example of a way to start with something. You know, sort of like if someone said to me, like on day one of like me voice acting, right, so you've got to like, you know, get an agent and you've got to like get like this mic and set this up and be on all these platforms and like, you know, have a LinkedIn account and like do all this marketing. I would feel so overwhelmed and just be like, right, I don't know where to start. I don't know anything about this. I've got too much to do. But if someone said to me like, okay, just get your basic setup with your mic in your studio, do a few recordings, send those off to someone and see what they think. That's totally doable, and that's just the seed. You just need to start, and then like with experience comes opportunities if you're open to them, which I always am. And then it grows from there. It's like, don't sort of say to someone, oh, right, there you go, you've got to go and get a tree. It's like, no, just have the seed and like grow it from there. It's like, that's what I don't like about all this AI stuff. It's like, it rushes things.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's so much knowledge that we need as humans to be learnt in the organic process. And that always starts small. It's like not everybody wants to like build this at scale, build that at scale. It's like, great, I've built something at scale and I know absolutely jack bleep about all the bits to get into. See, I've saved your sound editor a job.
Thank you so much, Becky. Millions saved in post-production since we are auto-bleeping ourselves.
So I'd say, give someone like a small, achievable thing. Yeah, like it's way more inspiring saying like, you know, like give this a try, you know, like da-da-da-da-da-da, and maybe a little example of like, you know, of someone you know that sort of just did a little thing and then it grew from there, rather than just trying to say to someone, oh, in a week you're going to be like CEO of this massive corporation if you just do this thing, because people will be like, what?
I get that. Becky, absolutely love this. Is there anything I didn't ask you on how to be more authentic, on how to make people able to relate to you, make people trust you via podcasting? What is it that you'd like to, what's the word of the end? That's absolutely not English.
The last word.
The last word.
I would say generally, find your own unique fingerprint of charisma to bring to your podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've got all these voices in the world. Some are like, and they're all different, but they're all very listen toable. So if you find your own little charisma fingerprint and staying curious, always seeking the truth, those three things. So seeking the truth, stay curious, charisma fingerprint.
Mm-hmm.
Done.
Love this. Becky Fountain, ladies and gentlemen. Becky, if people want to find out more about you, reach out to you, where should they go?
So I'm on LinkedIn, or you could also visit my website, www.beckyfountainvo.com.
Here we go. We'll put all the links in the description. Becky, thank you so much for coming on Podcast Gurus.